I never fit. I was an alpha female, a sales executive that kind of just didn't fit in any box. When psychologists or somebody that I was in love with or whatever said that I was in the wrong body, I started to think, well, maybe I am. I'm a biological woman that medically transitioned to appear like a male through synthetic hormones and surgery. I will never be a man. Is it transphobic for me to tell the truth? Why is it that a couple hundred years from now, if you dug up my body, they're gonna go, yeah, that was a woman, had babies.
Can you tell me about the procedures that you had?
I've had 7 surgeries. I've had 1 stress heart attack. I've had a helicopter life ride with a pulmonary embolism. I've had 17 rounds of antibiotics. I had 6 inches of hair on the inside of my urethra for 17 months. Nobody would help me, including the doctor that did this to me because I lost my insurance. I get infections every 3 to 4 months. I'm probably not gonna live very long.
Was there any real discussion of the risks and the side effects and?
No, there's not. And I know that people want to think that there is, but there's not. The truth is that medical transition is experimental. We have studies that said that medical transition helps mental health with kids. They've all been retracted, modified, changed. But the only long-term study tells us 7 to 10 years is when transgender people are the most suicidal.
After?
After surgery. But that's transphobic to say.
Hey everybody, lovely welcome to you guys. So welcome back to my channel. This is a very touchy topic, the one we're going to discuss today. I think it is a conversation that should be had. I don't know about you guys, but I have been seeing a lot of videos on YouTube of stories of, people detransitioning and how they came to the realization that that wasn't the right decision. I would like to say from the get-go that this is in no way, shape or form intended to offend anyone. This is for information's sake. Of course, you know that transgenderism and gender dysphoria has been the focal point of, I want to say, every major debate that has been held today. The issue a lot of people have is when it comes to children and parents choosing to allow their kids to undergo gender transition. And of course, this has irreversible damages. We're going to watch a video of this woman. I found it very, very heartbreaking. Here it is.
Hi, Sinead. We are at the 2022 LGB Alliance Conference. You spoke last year. That was the first time that I became aware of your story, and you shared very personal details about how your life transitioning and detransitioning and how the challenges that you faced and continue to face. I want to introduce you to an American audience who may not have heard of you. So you're from Glasgow, Scotland, and you went through an experience of cross-sex hormones, testosterone, as well as surgery. Mm-hmm. At what age did you begin to medically transition?
So I was an adult transitioner, so I didn't actually start the medical process until I was 24. The desire to transition sort of popped up when I was around 20 or 21, but I didn't actually refer myself to the clinic until I was 23. And then the following year, medicalization began.
What were you feeling in the years leading up to that decision that you could not live your life as a woman you are?
I was very bitter. I was very resentful. I didn't like being a woman. I didn't like being perceived as a woman. I absolutely despised my body, and I was under the impression that if I were to, quote, become a man, that the problems and the self-hatred that I felt would disappear.
And did it?
I think I convinced myself for a couple of years that it did. Because I was a female taking testosterone, I got a lot more energy. I felt that I could do more. I was more motivated. So I did feel, if we were having this conversation in 2015, I would tell you that transition saved my life, because I believed that.
If you heard what she said, which I think is what we can all take out of that interview, is that she answered the question saying that if someone had asked me at that time, I would have said yes. Transitioning absolutely saved my life. That is to say, right now, she does not hold to that same view anymore. That should make us question why the media and physicians are continuing to jump on this wagon of affirmative care. If adults are having to rethink that very, very difficult decision, what makes you think that a child is not going to rethink that decision? Also, there was a research that was done on children. They wanted to understand if kids can grow out of gender dysphoria, and this is what they discovered. 65 to 94% of children eventually grow out of gender dysphoria. Now, listen to me. This is not 10%. This is not 20%. Hell, this is not even 50%. This is from 65, to 94% of young people grow out of gender dysphoria. What does that tell you? And I'm just going to be honest. How is this not part of the narrative? Do you understand that this is a life-altering decision? So, I don't know if you know who this person is, but I think you should. She wrote a book called Irreversible Damage. The transgender craze seducing, I guess, young women or girls or something like that. I'll link the book in the description section so you can check it out. She did an interview with Jordan Peterson where she presents her book, and the things she discovered are just mind blowing. Here is a clip where she explains it.
Why did you write the book?
I wrote the book because a woman wrote to me. I had written a piece for the Wall Street Journal on transgender pronoun laws that we have in New York and California now that assign criminal and civil penalties for failing to use someone's preferred pronoun. And I pointed out that these laws are straightforwardly unconstitutional in the United States. And a reader wrote to me, she read this and she said, maybe you'll take up my issue, but I'm a mom. My daughter had no symptoms of gender dysphoria throughout, her growing up. But the gender dysphoria being the severe discomfort in one's biological sex. But she went off to college. She had a lot of mental health problems. And she went off to college, and with a group of girlfriends, they all decided they were transgender. And she started a course of testosterone. And I've had this problem. There are now an epidemic of these young girls who are in a lot of very real pain, deciding that gender must be their problem and very quickly obtaining hormones and surgeries. And she told me that no journalist would take it up. She had written to many journalists, and I tried to find her an investigative journalist who would write about this or at least investigate it. And when I was unable to find one, I finally, 3 months later, I got back in touch with her. I said, all right, I'll look into it.
I think that is interesting, really. The fact that this mother, worried out of her mind, wanted somebody to take on her daughter's case and just wanting to tell her daughter's story, but nobody would listen. I thought a journalist's job was to investigate stories and present it to the public. It's just really sad that this kind of situation is going on, and instead of questioning the origin of problems, we're just accepting them for, at face value.
It's exactly the sort of issue that you can get pilloried for. And I've had a fair bit of that over the last number of years. And so you claim in the book that this is a epidemic. One of the things I'm wondering about is what relevant stats do you have at your disposal? And why language like that?
Well, I actually asked a bunch of, I conducted nearly 200 interviews for the book. And I actually asked a lot of scientists once I had some numbers, what do you call this? What is it when we have a 100-year diagnostic history of gender dysphoria, and it always afflicted boys and men, okay? And now, for the very first time in the last decade, there has been a giant surge in a different population claiming to be gender dysphoric. It has shifted from onset in young boys, and to teenage girls with no childhood history, and it's shifted from men to women. So I asked them, when you have a demographic jump, and all of a sudden they are, as these teenage girls now, the leading demographic. So these are girls who as a population experienced virtually no gender dysphoria throughout history, suddenly being the leading demographic.
Do you think maybe it has something to do with the fact that society is telling women to be more manly? Maybe? I don't know. I'm just saying.
Is there a scientific term for this? And they would always say, yes, epidemic.
I see. The rapid move by organizations like the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association to change the wording that they've used surrounding the discussion on gender identity. Correct?
Yes, that's right. They have changed the wording, but the bigger change, of course, is that they've gone to an affirmative care standard, which means that they no longer apply any medical judgment. They simply surrender all judgment and agree with or affirm the patient's self-diagnosis. And what it says is you must agree with the patient's self-diagnosis. Put another way, it suggests that you should begin with the conclusion. Your conclusion must be that this person has gender dysphoria, and then you can, go along from there and start prescribing treatments. That's not how medicine or any other area of therapy is practiced. You don't begin with the conclusion, you investigate it. First of all, the affirmative care standard, that's the problem. And I don't advocate a particular method of treating transgender people. I don't even advocate a method of treating transgender teenagers. All I'm pointing out in the book is that there seems to be a sudden rise in these teenage girls who are subject to peer influence and social media influence, deciding they're transgender, and there are no medical safeguards for these girls. There's no means right now, and no one determining whether they actually have the correct diagnosis before proceeding to treatment. All the doctors who disagree, and there are many, and they're speaking up all the time, are silenced. They are told that they could lose their license if they don't immediately affirm the adolescent, no matter what her other mental health problems are, and immediately go along with facilitating her transition.
Right. You talk about about the occurrences at the Mental Health Institute at CAMH in Toronto.
Yes, that's right. I mean, you had, Ken Zucker, the truly a giant and the in the field of gender dysphoria, who actually oversaw the authoring of the definition of gender dysphoria. He was fired.
Right.
He was fired,
Let's talk about Ken Zucker for a moment or two. So, as you said, he occupied a prestigious position in the world of transgender treatment, and I think was universally regarded as the most outstanding and most objective scientist working in this field. I've spoken to him about it on some occasions, not publicly ever, and he struck me as a dedicated clinician and researcher, and he advocated for, and still advocates for, as far as I know, a wait-and-see treatment method based on the presupposition that most children with gender dysphoria who evince an interest in transforming their body to that of the other sex should be encouraged to wait, because if waiting is with sufficient patience, most of the children who manifest these concerns desist. I think it's 70 to 80% of them. A certain percentage, fairly high, come to the conclusion that they're gay. And it's perhaps the case that that's driving some of their early gender dysphoria, confusion about their identity. And Zucker was fired from CAMH and also pilloried in a variety of newspapers and other publications as a consequence of what was essentially his mainstream stance. Now, I believe, and I haven't followed this up recently, but I believe that he was engaged in a number of court battles with the publications that had gone after him, and I believe that he won his legal cases.
He did. They had to apologize, and they settled with him. I mean, they really wronged him.
Yes, definitely.
You've seen that's what happens when professionals speak out on this issue. And of course, when I say speak out, all they're expressing is concern that there is an overdiagnosis here. You're seeing young teenage girls who do not seem to have typical gender dysphoria, nonetheless be immediately fast-tracked towards transition.
Okay. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because this lady is not just talking about something that she kind of like picked out of thin air. No, she's talking about something she's researched at length. And here she's going to like just, she's going to come with the facts, the receipts, okay? And I think you all should pay attention to this particular part.
So in America, it's a little harder to look at, to come up with these numbers, although I'll tell you the numbers that I do know, okay? It's harder because we don't have centralized medical care like they do in Britain. In Britain, where they have centralized medical care, they can tell you that the number of young women being referred for gender treatment has exploded over 4,000% in the last decade. Okay. In America, we don't have centralized medical care, and you don't even need a diagnosis of gender dysphoria to start treatment. You can start a course of testosterone without ever having received a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So they're a little harder to come by, but here's what I can tell you. In 2018, 2% of high school students said they were transgender. So that's 2 in 100 kids. That's an enormous increase over what was historically the rate of gender dysphoria in the population, which was 0.01%. So 1 in 10,000 people. Went from roughly 1 in 10,000 people to 2 in 100 high school students. We also know that between 2016 and 2017, the number of females requesting gendered surgery in the United States quadrupled. So we know these are the exploding rates. And then, of course, I've interviewed many therapists, and Lisa Littman of Brown University did her survey. And when you talk to therapists, when you talk to parents, you get the same thing over and over. And that is that the leading demographic asking for gender transition is teenage girls with no childhood history of gender dysphoria.
So with over 100 years of diagnostic history, they saw a difference in the demographic, right? And I think that's important to point out. Mike commented earlier about maybe it's how society wants women to be, because there has to be a logical explanation to all of this garbage. Like, what the hell is going on? I think it's really, really disingenuous of the media, particularly, okay? Because what I have seen is this constant push of gender affirmation care. The necessary steps that should be taken to diagnose someone clinically and correctly isn't done. Instead, we are accepting it and saying, okay, that child should transition. Now, a woman was arrested because her 10-year-old child got a tattoo. If your child is on puberty blockers, that is not child abuse. Are you guys kidding me? Okay.
Look, the lies have to stop somewhere. I could have walked away from this. I'm not saying it's been fun, and I'm not saying it's been easy since the book came out. There have been plenty of times when I thought, I really don't know if I chose the right path here. But yeah. I have to tell you something. The lies have to stop somewhere, don't they? I mean, right now we're living through a blizzard of them. And at some point, someone has to say, a few of us who are just, willing to need to say enough. We have to subject this to the same medical scrutiny and the same skepticism that we would subject anything else to, any other medical phenomenon.
Yes, well, terrible as objecting to the lies might be, I suspect that it's not as terrible as the consequences of letting them flourish unchallenged. I think
that's right. A lot of young women are getting badly hurt. And at some point, somebody has to be willing to say something.
Yeah, well, I hope that your book helps. That would be,
Thank you.
That would be what anyone who is thinking clearly would hope.
This is being pushed on kids. And you've seen that with this famous basketball player, Dwayne something, and the wife, and you heard the story of how his former wife, ex-wife, is saying that Dwayne is doing all of this for money. Do we know if that's a fact? We don't know, but I think the story is definitely worth following. And then you have children who started to conduct themselves as the opposite sex right from when they were like children. And one of the most recognized stories around the world is that of this individual, Jazz. And I'm not going to start to tell you all of the psychological damages that this person has had to overcome or continues, still struggling with. Another shocking story comes from Australia. This young teenager who thought that he was a girl. And he had started taking, I think, puberty blockers, and his boobs were coming out. And then 2 years later, he tells his mom that he doesn't think he's a girl anymore. Thank God that the whole situation was still reversible. But think about that. That happened to a 12-year-old boy. I'm guessing he's probably 16 or 17 now. I don't know. My question is very simple. Why in the world are we pushing this gender affirmative care? Please answer me. If you know that there's a very high percentage of people regretting it and outgrowing it, why do parents get told all the time that if their children do not transition, they're going to have a dead child? I'm sorry, I don't know how else to ask the question. It's very simple. Why? I'm going to close off with this. I cannot even begin to imagine and understand the psychological pain and physical discomfort that people who struggle with their identity have to go through. I cannot even start to imagine. But I can say one thing that I'm very sure of, which is God saves. God loves. You were not made in the image of other people. You were made in the image of God. This might sound simple, but this is my way of encouraging anybody out there who is currently going through this. Please ask multiple questions, go on different doctor's appointments, meet the therapist, and get different opinions before you do damages to your body that you cannot take back. I beg you. And if you're a parent, I hope that you will find the courage knowing that there are people working hard every day to do research and to find other solutions to this problem, because at the end of the day, it is a mental illness, and it's not bad to say it's mental illness. It's the truth. We have to acknowledge the problem before we can solve it. Listen to what people have to say. You cannot just give in to everything your child says. Children have a wild imagination, and today they want to be, I don't know, Spider-Man, and tomorrow they want to be a little mermaid. But understand that the solution is not castrating your child. That is not the solution. And I think society can do so much better at presenting this issue to the world. Thank you so much, guys, for sticking throughout the entire video. I hope you found this interesting. And do not forget to subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it so much. Thank you guys so much. I will see you all in the next one.